All right. So let me show you something I just put together. This is about those two kinds of life estates. So let's look at it. Wish I could pause it. But I'm going to go over this here with you in just a second. Oh, nope, that's not the one I want to show you. Sorry. Here we go. I know what to do. So two kinds of life estates. The one that's for the life of another is called pour aut vie, and that is inheritable. You can leave it to your heirs. You don't own it for your own lifespan. You own it for the lifespan of a third party, a different person. Therefore, if that person dies, then you don't own it anymore. But if you die, since you're the life tenant, and that person's still alive whose life it depends on, then your heirs could inherit it. With me? So if what your heirs are inheriting from you because you died is an estate for the life of another, and that other person's still alive, then your heirs that inherited this, they own that same an estate for the life of another. So they don't own it fee simple absolute. They own it for as long as that measuring life is still alive. They might be less excited about inheriting this land from you or property when they find out it's not going to be forever. It's only going to be for as long as some other person is alive. So what can you do when you have an estate, a conventional life or a life estate? Can you sell it? Yes. As long as the buyer you're selling it to understands that they don't own it forever and ever. They own it while someone is alive. Can you rent it out? Yes, as long as the tenant knows it's a life estate. Can you get a mortgage on it? Theoretically, yes, if you can find a bank willing to loan you money against a property that is not going to be yours when some other person dies. You follow me? What you can do with it is pretty much what you can do with any property, as long as the person with whom you're doing the thing understands it's not a fee simple absolute ownership with no conditions. It's a life estate ownership. So it's inheritable. You can leave it to your heirs, but as long as that measuring life is still alive, because there's a life tenant and there's a measuring life. So the difference between an estate for the life of another and a conventional life estate is that the life tenant and measuring life are the same person when it's a conventional life estate. The lifespan that it depends on is you. You're the life tenant and the measuring life. Therefore, when you die, it's going to go somewhere other than you or your estate. Therefore, you can't leave it to your heirs. That's why it's not inheritable when it's a conventional life estate. But it is inheritable when it is for the life of another kind of life estate. Because the life tenant and the measuring life are two different people when it's for the life of another. Now, with all that said, the measuring life dies. What happens to the property? Here's another way to say it. Who decides what happens to the estate when the measuring life person dies? If you're the life tenant, it's not you. It's the person you bought it from. It's the seller that you bought it from. It's the seller's decision what happens at the death of the measuring life. And when they sell it to the life tenant, they've told them, look, once that measuring life person dies, whether it's you or some other person, then I want it to come back to my estate. If I'm dead, I still want it to come back into my family. It's going to come back to my estate. It's going to revert back. You might see the word revert. You might see reversionary because it's reverting back to the seller, the original seller. Or they could say, I don't need it back. I'm rich. I'll just let it go to a third party. And the name of that is a remainderman. Could be a charity. Quite often might be a charity. Are you with me? It's weird. Have I ever dealt with it in real life? No, never. I've heard of it done in the case of like an old person, basically just letting them live in the house that they're used to while they're still alive. Let's not kick them out. Let's let them stay there. We'll give them a life estate for their own life. The let's see, what else was it? So somebody said, does it go to probate? I don't know if you were talking about the conventional or the for the life of another, but yeah, if it's for the life of another and it's the life tenant who dies and it's going to pass to their heirs, then yeah, it would have to kind of fall through that probate, that process. And then somebody said, who pays the property taxes? And life tenants pay the property taxes and any special assessments that might come up. And they would pay the interest, but not the principal on any sort of debt that's secured by the property. Some other things you can't do when it's a life estate is waste the property. You can't like clear cut all the trees. You've got to keep it usable. In other words, let's catch up with the slides and clean up, because there's one more little detail we need to talk about, which is what happens if somebody breaks the condition of like that whole fee simple defeasible. So here was our little different looking chart from the slides. The inheritable types of estates are fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible, and a life estate for the life of another, pour autre vie. The kind that are not inheritable are an ordinary conventional life estate, and then something we haven't covered yet called a marital life estate. So to recap, the fee simple absolute was the best kind. This is what you want if you could pick. No conditions, complete ownership, unlimited, inheritable. You can leave it to your heirs. The highest, best form of ownership when you're getting something from a seller. Defeasible has conditions, limitations. Condition subsequent means you must not use it in a certain way. Determinable means you must keep using it in a certain way. And example we use is the church. Must use it, must always be a church. Condition subsequent, must not use it to sell alcohol or fill in the blank. So what happens if you break those conditions? What happens if that owner who owns it fee simple, defeasible, determinable does not keep using it in a certain way as they're required to? Then they lose it back to the owner, the seller. They lose it automatically. Automatic reversion back to the owner. Don't ask me how. You don't need to know it for the test. I've never had to deal with it in real life. I'm sure the court is involved. But what you do need to know that is testable is fee simple, defeasible, determinable, the one that you must keep using it in a certain way. If you break that rule, that condition, it automatically goes back to the owner or to the seller. Automatically goes back to the one you bought it from. The other one, condition subsequent, that says you must not use it in a certain way. If you break that condition and you do sell alcohol with it, or you whatever it is you're not supposed to do, then it does not automatically revert back to them. They would have to come after you in a court of law. They'd have to sue you for it. Don't worry about it. Don't get in the weeds on this. Just know those 5 or 6 bullet points about this stuff and be able to apply it to a test question. And just as a warning in general about all of this content, be careful if in your mind while you're taking the test you start thinking things like yes, but, or why. Don't get too deep. Just know the laws and the rules that we teach, apply them, and apply them to the test question that is asked of you. Don't read more into the test question than what they give you. Because when you start thinking, well, yes, but in this other case, it could possibly be that, well, you're putting too much into it and now you're going to mess yourself up. So just be careful. By the way, determinable and condition subsequent are both types of defeasible, meaning they can both be defeated. They are defeatable. Because if you don't adhere to the condition, whatever it is, whichever of the two, you lose it. Do you lose it automatically? If the test question says Fred got a fee simple determinable estate from Wilma and he did not keep using it as a stone quarry, what's going to happen? Is he going to lose his ownership of it automatically or through the court system? That would be automatically, because determinable, they lose it back to the seller automatically if they break the rule, break the condition. Okay, a deed or a title that has a condition that's limiting ownership use, some sort of the ownership condition, it's a condition that limits how you can use it, is called what? What is it that limits, which type of ownership puts a condition? Give me some answers in the chat. I'll give you some answer choices. A deed or title that has a condition that limits ownership use is called what? Which of the following? Is it called fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible, fee simple determinable, or fee simple subject to a condition subsequent? Which is the best answer out of those four? See if I can put it in the chat. All right, now it's in the chat. There's the multiple choice. It's some kind of fee simple. It's either fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible, fee simple determinable, or fee simple subject to a condition subsequent. The question is, what's a deed that has a condition that limits ownership use? Which of these is the best answer? Which of these four types of fee simple is the best one? Best answer for what is being asked. This is going to be a lesson in test taking skill. One of those annoying things when you're going to be like, well, yeah, but it could be this. And you're going to be right. It could be that. In fact, it could be 3 out of the 4 of these possibilities. Right? Because a condition being placed upon your ownership is fee simple defeasible, and fee simple determinable is a type of defeasible, and so is fee simple subject to a condition subsequent. All 3 have or signify that there is a conditional ownership going on, right? So if you've answered any of those 3, any of them except absolute, then in and of itself, you're right. Good answer. Good job. However, if we step back, zoom out a little bit, the only thing the question is asking is this: a deed that has a condition that limits ownership use. What's the best answer out of those 4? We're going to throw out absolute. We know that's not the answer. The best answer would be the kind that is the bigger category, because determinable and subject to are both types of fee simple defeasible. Are you with me? So if you pick determinable, that means you're saying that condition subsequent is not the right answer. And they're both, there's not enough information here to say one is better than the other answer. You with me? But the answer that is kind of the best of the ones that I've given you, and this is, frankly, to be honest, this is a terrible question, terrible test question. I would need to word it better and give you a few more details. But it serves a purpose. It's a point to this. The point is, best answer is fee simple defeasible, because that's the one that has a condition. What is the condition? Doesn't matter. The question is not telling you what the condition is, but there is one. And the kind that's just, there's some kind of condition, is defeasible. We just don't know which it is. I got you. I got you, Tony. Okay. Just making sure. Okay, there we go. So let's look at an actual question that's better worded than this. Lewis agreed to purchase a property from Lisa, and I can't zoom this in. I apologize. I don't think I can. Maybe I can. No, I don't think I can. Lewis agreed to purchase a property from Lisa. Upon examination of the deed during the title search, the closing attorney discovers that Lewis's use of the property was limited to being used as a convenience store. Which type of ownership does Lewis have? Fee simple determinable, fee simple detectable, discoverable, or defeasible? What's the best answer out of these four? What is the condition? The condition is, has to keep using it as a convenience store. You don't see the word not in there. Limited to use as a convenience store. Must keep using it as a convenience store. Therefore, key here is, let's get rid of the words that we know are nonsense. Detectable and discoverable. That's nothing. We didn't learn anything about that. Best answer is determinable, because must keep using it as a thing. It describes it the closest. Yes, it's also a type of fee simple defeasible, but more specifically, since they gave us the exact example, it's limited to using it as a convenience store only. Must keep using it as a convenience store. Fee simple determinable. If determinable was not an answer choice, if you only had three of them, B, C, or D, then the best answer would be D, fee simple defeasible. You with me? Again, we created these questions. These are not PSI sanctioned. Therefore, they probably could be worded better. But again, I want to train you to read them a certain way and make sure that you don't read too much into it. What about this one? Lewis agreed to purchase a property from Lisa. Upon examination of the deed during the title search, the closing attorney discovered that Lewis could never use the property as a convenience store. Must not use it as a convenience store. Which type does Lewis have? Conditional, consequential, condition subsequent, or condition servient? By the way, usually on practice exams and the real final and the PSI, there's at least one, maybe two, that are pretty easy answers to cross out that you know, well, that's not it. So you can usually get your chances increased to about 50-50. In this case, best answer, because he cannot use it as, must not use it as a certain thing, fee simple condition subsequent. Fee simple, the long version would be fee simple defeasible subject to a condition subsequent. But as long as condition subsequent is in there, it's C. That's the one. It's not A, because conditional is not as good of an answer as condition subsequent, right? Because it specifically says you must not use it as a convenience store. Lewis agreed to purchase from Lisa. Upon examination of the deed, the closing attorney discovered that Lewis's use of the property has no limitations. There's no limitations this time. What kind of deed does Lewis have to own this property if there's no limitations? No limitations. It's not avulsion. That's a water thing. It's not alienation. We haven't gotten there yet. There is a use for the word alienation in this course, but that's not it. It's not annexation. All of these words we have in this course. So you really need to know what the words are, and you'll be able to narrow it down. You could say, well, avulsion is a water right. So just knowing what avulsion means can help you rule that one out. Alienation is something that happens related to your foreclosure process. It's called an alienation clause. If you sell the property, it's the due on sale clause called the alienation clause. That means that, oh, you're selling it, you got to pay them off. You got to pay off that mortgage if you're going to sell the property. And then that leaves fee simple absolute. Yep, good job. Lewis agreed to purchase the property from Lisa. Upon looking at the deed, the attorney discovers Lewis's use of the property had a limitation. What type of deed does Lewis have? There's a limitation of some sort. So, did you get it? All right, just doing some housekeeping here. What type of deed did they have? A limitation of some sort. It's not absolute because there's a limitation. It's not determinable because that's too specific. There's a less specific answer that accomplishes the goal. It's also not condition subsequent. Again, too specific. Best answer is fee simple defeasible. Good job. I think most of you got that. All righty. Then the life estates. The pretty version, not the kind that I did my little ugly handwriting. Freeholdless estate that's limited in the duration depending on the lifespan of a person, right? Someone's lifespan is what it depends on. The conventional life estate means that the life tenant and the measuring life are the same person. So that life tenant gets to own it as long as they themselves are alive, for the life of the owner themselves. The for the life of another is an inheritable type of estate, meaning the new owner gets to own it for the entire lifespan of some other person. That's what makes it inheritable, because if the life tenant new owner person dies, then they can leave it to their heirs, and their heirs get it until this measuring life person dies. So you just want to hope that your measuring life person is young and healthy, right? Because you'll own it for longer. So if they question you on the test of which type of life estate is inheritable, what would you say? Which type of life estate is inheritable? Conventional or for the life of another? Which kind is inheritable? You can leave to your heirs. Which kind can you leave to your heirs? What is a conventional life estate? It's for the lifespan of who? The owner, the life tenant, new owner, or a third party person, separate person? Which one? Conventional life estate, that measuring life, is that the life tenant, new owner person, or is it a different person? So we got answers coming in about half and half. So we got to get this fixed. Some of you got it, some of you don't. And it's not something to easily grasp, right? Conventional life estate, the lifespan that depends on how long you own it is you. If you're the one that's the new owner, you're the life tenant, the new owner of this conventional life estate, then you get to own it as long as you yourself are alive. So therefore, can you leave it to your kids? When you die, your life is over, and so is your life estate. When it's a conventional life estate, because the measuring life is the same person as the life tenant, new owner, same thing. You can't leave it to your heirs if it's a conventional life estate. The one that is inheritable is the life estate pour autre vie, for the life of another. Because if it's the other measuring life person who dies, then yes, you lose your ownership. But if it's you who die and that person measuring life is still alive, so you're dead, but your heirs get it. Your heirs will get it. That's why it's inheritable, right? Takes a little bit to wrap your head around. I have other videos, right, on Impact Broker Coach YouTube channel. Chapter 2, I think it'd be day 2 or 3 probably. If you need to hear it in a different way and draw it out, I would say write this thing out. Like after class, whenever it is you do your studying, or like a recap the next time you study from after this class, try to, without looking, recreate that chart. And let's do that. Let me show you right now because I didn't complete the chart. So we've got our freehold estates. We've got the inheritable category. And we have the non-inheritable category. There's 3 that are inheritable: fee simple, absolute, fee simple defeasible, and then that has a couple of different things, which we'll get into in a minute. And then there was this life estate, pour autre vie, which means someone else's life. And it's inheritable because if that measuring life still lives while you die and you're the new owner person, your heirs can get it. But then the conventional life estate is not inheritable. Conventional life estate. The one we haven't covered yet is this other non-inheritable kind, and it's a marital life estate. And what that's really talking about is when you own a property with your spouse in North Carolina, they cannot leave you out of the will completely. And if they die without a will, because of marital life estate rules and laws in North Carolina, the surviving spouse gets a percentage of the estate depending on the years they were married. There's a chart that you do not need to know. It's not in the material. But if you're curious, you could Google it. North Carolina marital life estate chart. If you did that, you would see, depends on how many years you were married to the person. If they die either without a will, or if they try to leave you out of the will, they have a will, but they stick you and leave you out of it just to be a jerk, then they can't. You, because you were married to them, have marital rights. Therefore, the spouse gets a certain percentage of ownership depending on how long they were married to that person. So they get a certain percentage of ownership of that person's real estate holdings, depending on how long they were married to them. So they can't be stuck completely with nothing. That's all it really means. Marital life estate, that's all we're really talking about. And then back to the defeasible, there was determinable, and then subject to a condition. And then this one was all about you must not use it as a thing, and this other one was about you must keep using it as a thing certain way. You need to be able to write this chart, create it from your head from scratch, like we just did here. And then make lists, make lots of lists, make this chart. Maybe write things under fee simple absolute, little reminders that like it's the best kind. You might write under here the life tenant and the measuring life are different people, whereas they're the same over here. They're different for Pour Alt V. They're the same for conventional. You might write determinable is an automatic reversion back to the owner if you break that condition. Subject to is not automatic. So how you can remember that is the condition is that you must not use it as a thing. And then the reversion is that it's not automatic. Little things like that. And then as we get into other content, keep your notebook and make lists as your review. Think, okay, what's the difference between dual agency and designated dual? We haven't covered it. It's going to be a minute. But that sort of thing, be able to go back, be able to just make lists of things just to kind of keep it straight. See if you can list all of the pieces of that certain topic. Okay. Conventional life estate, not inheritable. It's temporary, right? Temporary meaning for the duration of a lifespan, the measuring lifespan. Ends upon the death of the life tenant because that's who the measuring life is. And then at that point, it's going to either revert or go to a remainderman. So here are the terms associated with this life estate stuff. The measuring life, the person whose lifespan your ownership depends on. That's how long you own it, is however long they live. The remainderman interest or the remainder interest. The original seller who sold you that life estate decides if it's going to go to this third-party remainderman or charity. Could be an entity like an LLC or a corporation. Could be a human. Or they want it back in the family, back to them, back to their estate. And it's up to that seller who sold you that life estate which of these two things is going to happen when the measuring life dies. Not up to you, the life tenant. It's up to them when they sold it to you. And here's the marital life estate. You have a right as a spouse even if you're not listed on the title to the property. We'll learn later that the title to real estate is called the deed. Even if you're not on the deed and your spouse owns it and they're on the deed but you're not, you still have rights to it because you're married to them. Welcome to North Carolina. And the amount of a percentage of rights you have to the property is based on how long you were married to that jerk. I say that because all of this is happening because they either didn't leave a will at all or they tried to cut you out of the will. So the word deed by itself means the title to the property. If you see the word deed, think car title. Like that's how you prove you own your car is your title. Well, how do you prove you own your house? The deed is the title to your house. For the life of another, same deal as conventional life estate, except the parties are different. Measuring life and life tenant are two different people. Therefore, If it's you, the life tenant who dies first before the measuring life dies, then then you can leave it to your heirs. Oh, what can you do with this life estate? If it's a life estate, conventional life estate, or for the life of another, either one, whichever one. Both of them you can, you can transfer your interest, you can sell it, you can mortgage it, you can rent it out, you can use some of the wood, the timber, you cut down the trees for fuel and repairs just to maintain things, but you can't clear cut it and sell everything because that would be detrimental to the value. That'd be called wasting the property. But you can do all these things only for the lifespan of that measuring life, right? And whoever you sell it to or lease it to or mortgage with have to understand this is only for the duration of someone's lifespan. And they're going to want to know who, right? You're going to want to know whose lifespan, who is the measuring life. What is your responsibility as a life tenant? You have to make ordinary repairs, maintain it, keep it in good shape because it's going to go somewhere else when the measuring life is done. Got to pay those taxes. Got to pay the interest on the original owner's mortgage, the one you bought it from. You got to pay the interest on that mortgage. You don't have to pay off of the principal of it, but you have to pay the interest on it. What you can't do is sell all the wood and timber from the property. You can't waste the property. And you can't, if it's a conventional life estate, you can't leave it to your heirs. All right, next topic. Homestead Act. You don't need to know super specifics here. It just protects the home from creditors, like credit card type creditors. So in other words, if you're behind, if you're getting trouble with credit card collectors, debt collectors, you've got protection under the Homestead Act that those creditors can't cause you to lose the home. It can still be foreclosed if you don't pay your taxes because you have to pay your property taxes. That's the first position, lien holder. In other words, if you're in trouble as a homeowner, property owner, and you haven't paid your real estate taxes and there's a special assessment for the street light they put out front, and you didn't pay that, and you haven't paid your mortgage, and somebody put a roof on your house and you didn't pay them, and so they filed a lien against the property and you haven't paid them either, and same thing for a plumber. You just haven't paid anybody. Got like 8 people you haven't paid. And that property is going to be foreclosed. The order that all those people you've tried to stiff gets paid depends. The first one that's going to get paid above everybody else is the real estate property tax. That lien, if you haven't paid that gets paid first. And then the special assessment for the street light gets paid second because it's a government special assessment the government put on your property. And then the other ones you are going to have to pay in order that they were recorded at the courthouse. Because they went down to the Register of Deeds at the courthouse and said, hey, she didn't pay me like she was supposed to, so I'm going to put a lien on the property. And so the order of those liens, which of those gets paid first, depends on who registered and filed them first. It's called a race state, pure race. Whoever won the race to the courthouse and filed and recorded it first is the one who gets paid before the other ones. And the money might run out. So you want to be as far up the list as you can be as to who gets paid sooner than everyone else. Well, the Homestead Act says that creditors to certain exemptions can't come after your home. You're protected. Your home's going to be safe. And it depends on your age and some other things. The details are there in your textbook. And the coverage we have in the course for this is not much because we don't do it. In Florida, they do it a lot. It's more of a thing. But in North Carolina, it's just sort of not as much of a topic. Property owner wants to transfer their property to another and then have it returned to them. What kind of deed should they give? Should they grant to that buyer? the best kind of deed that makes it come back to them? Somebody asked in the chat earlier, what if you sign a quitclaim deed? Well, that quitclaim deed would not have the same estate stuff on it. For some reason, maybe like, maybe you're talking about the marital stuff. In a divorce, depends on what happens in that divorce settlement. Someone might buy the other person out. Whatever the most recent deed, the current deed in effect, that's the one that you would, of course, go by. So if you're a broker listing a house and they say, yeah, we just got divorced, for one thing, make sure they really did, because they might just be separated forever and they consider themselves divorced for dating purposes, but they're really legally not. You need to know so that you can get both of their signatures if you're dealing with a co-ownership situation. If they're separated but not divorced, you still probably have a co-ownership situation, right? It doesn't matter about the separation. It matters if they have that finalized divorce thing. Okay, wants to transfer to another and have it returned to them. One of the life estates where it's got that reversionary interest built into it. So that would work. We didn't give you a lot of detail in this test question. But in real life, if any of these words come up, here's the good news. Once you get past this class and get your license and you're out there practicing real estate, and you hear any of this life estate word coming out of the mouth of a potential client, you run. You don't run. You just tell them, you know what? Here's what that means. But as far as what you should do, let me give you the name of a good attorney, because that's legal advice that you would not give them. You could tell them the difference between a conventional and a for the life of another, or fee simple absolute versus defeasible, if you remember it and you want to show off. But don't give them advice as to which one they should or shouldn't choose or what their rights are under certain things. That gets into giving legal advice, and if you're not an attorney, don't give legal advice. So once you get the license, you kind of don't need to worry about this stuff. You can pass this information off to an attorney to deal with. That's the best answer to a lot of this sort of questions that you get out there in the wild. Call an attorney. Okay, next topic. Ownership. If one person owns a property, here's one of those cases where the word doesn't help. We'll talk about this one and then we'll have our next break. Give me a minute. 1 minute. If one person owns property, it's called ownership in severalty. And I know you're looking at the word severalty and you're seeing the word several and you're thinking that's more than one person. What a dumb word. And I agree. But back it up a couple letters. Instead of seeing the word several, look at the word sever. If you sever something, then what you're left with is a piece. One piece. I'm just looking for ways to remember this stuff, right? So sever. However you need to do it. Ownership by one entity or one person, not two, not married people, not two people, three people. One person, one entity owns it. It's called ownership in severalty. On the deed, it would say Neil Pender owns this property as an ownership in severalty, or has ownership in severalty for this property, that sort of thing. If I'm the only owner of it, no other person. But if you own it with someone else or multiple people or more than one entity, like two different companies own something, more than one is called concurrent. And I like that word because I remember my Spanish from too long ago. I do remember the word con means with, con means with, right? Arroz con pollo. So with someone, that's how I remember that one. So concurrent ownership means more than one person or entity. One person owning it means severalty. Well, guess what? There's several kinds. Terrible choice of words. There's multiple kinds of concurrent ownership. And that's what we're going to talk about after the break. I'll see you in 10.
What happens after winning a $6.4 million jackpot? What happens after winning a $6.4 million jackpot?
Do we have Condor? Do you? There we go. Oh, yeah. He has hit and sparks flying from this power pole. He has just. Do we have Condor? Do you? There we go. Oh, yeah. He.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You're really hot.
Oh, mirror.
You. Because my zipper's falling for you.
Tracy, what are we doing today?
Holy crap.
That was a lot.
Wait for it. Do you see it? Zoom in a little more.
Welcome back. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Welcome back. Okay. Where are we? Getting into a whole big new topic for multiple owners. Multiple owners are called concurrent owners. And there are three choices. If you're a multiple owner owning something with someone else, there are three possible ways you could do that. By the way, if you do own the property with someone else, there's something about that called unity of possession. You couldn't take the floor plan and draw like a line down the middle and say, now you stay over there on your side and I'll stay over here on my side. That's not allowed. That's not how it works. Everybody has full access to the entire property. There's no sectioning it off. That's not a thing. So let's talk about, I'm going to go out of order here. Let's talk about the one that definitely makes the most sense. The one that's the easiest to understand is for married people, and it's called tenancy by the entirety. Tenancy by the entirety means you own it with a spouse. The reason tenancy by the entirety is the most common, typical way that married people own property is because of this thing, right of survivorship. Because if you're owning it with your spouse, let's create a little example. Let's say you're getting married for the second time. You had a first spouse. Now you're marrying a second spouse. First one didn't go so well. You're going to do it again, this time better. But now you've got adult children, grown kids, and they're doing great. They're fine financially. They don't ask you for anything. They have good jobs. You're not worried about them in life. You're not worried about them financially. But you've sold everything, your house that you had with the previous spouse, with the kid's mother, kid's dad, and you're marrying this new person, and you two decide to move to the beach, and you're going to have a new condominium built. You're going to build a condo for the two of you to live in. And you're going to own it as tenants by the entirety. Because if you die, you're not so much worried that your kids get your portion. You don't need to leave it to your kids. They're doing fine without you. You just want to make sure your new spouse gets complete ownership of it. They're going to own all of it if you die. And then if they die, you are going to own all of it. That's what right of survivorship means. The surviving owner gets all of it. You don't leave it to your spouse. You don't leave it to your heirs. The spouse who's still living gets it. Right? You with me? Okay. Tenancy by the entirety is for married people only. But it's not required that married people can only own property this way. They can choose to own it any of the three ways that we're going to be studying. So we're learning this one first, tenancy by the entirety, because the vast majority of married people in North Carolina own property this way. They own it as tenants by the entirety because it's got this right of survivorship component built into it. You want it set up probably so that if you die, your spouse gets the whole thing. If you don't want that, if instead of the situation I gave you, you are worried about your adult kids and you do want to give your portion to them if you die because your surviving spouse will be fine on their own, and you're like, well, they've got money, they've got other things, I'll leave them. I want to give ownership, my portion of ownership of this real estate to my kids. Then you can't pick this one. Then you and your spouse would not be able to own it as tenants by the entirety because your wishes would not be able to take place. You would need to own it as the other kind called tenants in common. That's the one that does not have right of survivorship built in. Tenants in common or tenancy in common allows you to leave your part to your heirs and then the other owner still has their part. And by the way, we'll talk about tenants in common in a minute. I don't want to confuse the issue. Let's finish talking about tenants by the entirety. It's for married people only, but not only married people are limited to this. Married people can own it anyway, but this is the one they're going to own it as the most frequently. It's also got to be the one, you've got to be married when you buy it, right? If you buy your first townhouse fresh out of college by yourself, and you are the only owner of that townhouse, and then a year after you own that thing or bought it, you find that special person and you get married and they move in with you, your ownership of the townhouse does not automatically become tenants by the entirety. It is not an automatic thing. You're still tenants in common. You went from an ownership in severalty because you were the only owner once upon a time, but then you got married. Now you're a concurrent owner, but you're still the only one that shows up on the deed. If you want to own that townhouse as a tenant by the entirety with your new spouse, then you need to go to an attorney and have them write up a new deed that says that. But if you don't, then it's not going to be tenants by the entirety. Now, they are still protected. Both of you as spouses, they're still protected because of the marital rights thing we just learned about. You couldn't leave them out of your will. You couldn't, if you died without a will, they would still have some percentage of ownership in the property. So that's covered. But again, just because you started out owning it by yourself and then got married doesn't mean that now it's tenants by the entirety. It doesn't happen like that. You would need to change it to that if you chose to. Okay, what else about by the entirety? If you sell it, if you own something with your spouse as tenants by the entirety, and the title, and you're going to sell it, then both of you have to sign the papers. In other words, you can't sell it without them knowing. Back to that example where you bought it by yourself. You might have bought it by yourself and then they came along and you never changed the ownership. You still are an owner. You're an owner in severalty. And then finally you decide to put them in the deed too. And so you say, okay, let's make it tenancy by the entirety. So you do. Well, if you sell that property, both of you have to sign saying that you know it's being sold. Even if you don't change it to by the entirety, they still have to sign off. In other words, the phrase is in North Carolina, it takes 1 to buy and 2 to sell. 1 signature to buy, 2 signatures to sell. When you bought it, you could buy it by yourself in most cases. We'll talk about that later, but when you sell it, even if you're the only owner on the deed, you still have to get the spouse's signature to sell it. You can't sell it in secret. You could buy it in secret if you're paying cash, but you can't sell it in secret because you own it as tenants. If you own it as tenants by the entirety, both people have to sign. You also cannot force your spouse to sell. So let's say that you own this thing and you're just tired of it. You're like, this mountain property. We don't even ever come here anymore. I want to sell it, but they don't. Maybe it was inherited and then they added you. And so you're tenants by the entirety together for this mountain cabin and you don't like it. You like the beach better and you just want to get the money out of it and go do something fun with it instead of letting it sit there in a cabin. You can't sue your spouse to force them to sell it in order to get the money out of it. With tenants by the entirety, there is no right to partition. That means sell it off, partition it. In the other two kinds that we're going to learn later, joint tenancy and tenants in common, there is that right. You can sue. You have a right to partition. You can force them to sell so that you can get your piece of money out of it, but not with this one. By the entirety, you can't sue for partition. It is by far the favored form of ownership for spouses in North Carolina. So this is a very likely North Carolina thing that's going to show up on the state portion of the exam. And then if you're married and you buy property and you don't tell the attorney how you want to own it, they're probably going to write it up this way unless you tell them otherwise. It is automatically going to be tenants by the entirety unless you tell them you want one of the other methods of ownership. Okay? So this one, what was special about tenants by the entirety? Right of survivorship. One spouse dies, the other spouse is now an owner in severalty. The only owner, they own all of it. You can't leave it to your heirs. Right? Now, what about if you want to not be married to somebody, but you still want right of survivorship? Well, you can't be a tenant by the entirety with them because you're not married. It's only for married people. But maybe you have a long-term relationship with them. And marriage is not your thing, but you still want to accomplish the goal so that if you die, they get all of it. If they die, you get all of it. That's what this is about. Joint tenancy includes the same right of survivorship. But you don't have to be married. You could be, because remember, married people can own it any of these three ways: by the entirety, joint, or tenants in common. As a joint tenant, as you'll see here, top of the line, and you'll see in the textbook, they make a special mention. We don't do it much in North Carolina. It's not legally favored. Attorneys rather would prefer not to do it this way. If you want to do it, if you want joint tenancy for whatever reason, then the attorney would have to write it in the deed in a very exact, specific wording so that it can be possible. If they don't use the right words in the deed to accomplish the joint tenancy that comply with like previous court case law that was determined, then you won't have joint tenancy. If you're thinking, yeah, but, or why, stop. Just learn what joint tenancy is. Learn the bullets. It's about 5 or 6 bullet points. Compare it to tenants in common and tenants by the entirety. And that's all you need to do with this stuff. Because again, this is another one of those things where in real life, if your client asks you about it, you could tell them what it means, but you'll never give them advice as to which they should do. You would say, you need to talk to an attorney to figure out what you should do. You could tell them the difference between them, but don't give them any advice. So in real life, it's kind of irrelevant. You do need to know the basic differences for the test. So not legally favored. You're probably not going to see it much. Got to have exact wording in order for it to happen, for that joint tenancy to actually happen. And then there's 4 unities of ownership interest with the acronym PITT, P-I-T-T. Ownership of possession. That means that you all own equal shares. If you want to own it with 2 other people, so there's 3 of you, 3 total owners, then joint tenancy is for you because you would have to own it. 3 people would own a third each, 33.33, right? A third of the ownership to each of the 3 people. If it's 4 of you, you would each own 25%. If it's 2 of you, you would each own exactly 50 each. So the same amount of possession. You also, in order to accomplish joint tenancy, the unity of time says you have to buy it at the same time in order to be a joint tenant with the other owners. So let's say that these 4 people buy it together at the same time. They are all 4 joint tenants in ownership. But then a year later, this person D sells to another person E, and they're allowed to do that. They don't have to ask permission either, by the way. D can sell to whoever he wants to because it's his right. And he sells it to E, but here's the thing. Since E wasn't around last year when it was bought by everybody, E cannot be a joint tenant. What E's ownership type would be is a tenant in common. So you would still have 3 people that are joint tenants, A, B, and C, But then the new owner E is not a joint tenant. They are a tenant in common. That's what it looks like. So with right of survivorship, that's something else about this joint tenancy. It includes it. In other words, if one of these people die, the other three are the only owners. You with me? So right now there's 4 owners with a 25% ownership each. It's equal ownership. But if one of them dies, the other joint tenants have automatic ownership, right of survivorship. You can't leave it to your heirs. If you are one of these owners, A, B, C, or D, and you want to leave it to your spouse and kids, let's say you and your college friends bought this together years ago, and you've been renting it out since you moved out. You needed it while you were in school, but now you're not, and you just kept it as a rental. And now it's a decade later, and you want to leave your portion or have it set up so that your portion goes to your kids and your spouse if you die, then you can't be a joint tenant. Joint tenancy will not let you accomplish that goal because of the right of survivorship. What's going to happen if D dies? Even if D leaves his portion in his will to E, it won't matter. E's not getting it. E has no ownership. If D dies, now instead of 4 owners, there's 3 because of the right of survivorship. Are you following me? Right? And so the test question can really throw you. The test question could be like this. Dwight, Jim, and Pam own property together as joint tenants. Well, let me pick a different one. Michael, Dwight, and Jim own property as joint tenants. Jim is married to Pam, and they have a couple of kids. Jim dies. Who is the new owner of the property? Who are the remaining owners of the property? If Jim dies, it was Michael, Dwight, and Jim, original owners. Jim dies. Jim would like to leave it to Pam and the kids, his portion, his third. Is that what's going to happen? Nope. Pam's not getting it because they owned it as joint tenants. It's going to be Michael and Dwight now who own it together, 50-50. No third party, no third person anymore. So the test question can throw you because they'll still mention the leaving it to heirs. You'll be like, oh, he wants to leave it to his heirs. Well, you can leave things to your heirs, so that must be it. No, it's not. If you owned it as a joint tenant, your heirs are screwed. They're out. You should have talked to your co-owners before you died into changing the ownership type to tenants in common, because that allows you to leave your portion to your heirs, right? But it's too late. When you died, it was joint tenancy, so now your surviving co-owners are the only owners, right? So let me go back and cover tenants in common, and then we'll look at the differences between joint and common. Tenancy in common is the most common form of ownership when you're not married. If you're not married, you're probably owning it together as tenants in common. It's for 2 or more people or entities. You can sell your portion. If you own it with 5 other people, you can sell your piece. You can also, just because it's 5 of you doesn't mean it's 20% each. Just because it's 2 of you doesn't mean it's 50% each. It allows, with tenants in common, you can have unequal portions. So I always think of this. Let's say it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, and out of college, she gets a great job. She's got her act together, and he's an artsy kind of guy. He's cute, but he doesn't really have his act together. He's not making much money. And she says to him, look, we can buy this place together, but we're not going to be 50-50 owners. I'm putting more of a down payment in this thing. I'm making more of the house payment. Therefore, I want more of an ownership percentage. Well, let's go 70-30 because that's about the proportion of what I'm putting into this household, right? So if that's what she wants to accomplish, then tenants in common is the way to go. Joint tenancy won't work because that's even. That's equal ownership interest. She needs to have it so that it's unequal, and so therefore tenants in common would be the right solution. Tenancy in common also allows for you to buy it at different times. So let's say she and he buy it together, and then next year one of her girlfriends decides to go in on it with them, and she buys in with them. So now there's 3 owners. Maybe she gave them some money in exchange for being one of 3 instead of only 2 owners. Now it's 3. Well, they're still all tenants in common. And don't forget that example from joint tenancy. If one of the original owners of the joint tenancy sells later, well, it's impossible for that new owner to be a joint tenant because that requires to be done at the same time. So the new owner is going to be a tenant in common because this one allows later or different times of purchase. So if you own something with other people and you're a tenant in common with them, you can also mortgage your piece. Let's say it's 3 of you and you each own a third each. You don't have to. You could own 50% and the other 2 could own the other 50% between them. Whatever amount that you own, you can encumber. That means you can obligate it. You can borrow against it. You can get a home equity line of credit with your portion. You can mortgage your portion. And then also with both tenants in common and joint tenancy, you can sue or force your co-owners to sell so that you can cash out and get your money if you want to. You can sue them for partition, force them to partition. So we've got Ali and Beth, and they both bought it. One bought it in January. The next one bought into it. Beth bought into it the next month. So now they're 50-50. They just happen to be. They could be 70-30 or 90-10. They could be whatever percentage each they decide on. But they're 50-50. Beth, without Ali's permission, because she doesn't need it, doesn't matter, she can sell to someone else, and she sells to Carrie and Dante. So her 50% became 20% to Carrie and 30% to Dante. And now Ali has 2 co-owners, not just the one. So back to that boyfriend-girlfriend thing, and they own it as tenants in common. What if boyfriend goes rock climbing and falls and dies, and they're tenants in common? They don't have kids, so when you don't have kids, the next person in line in your order of heirs are your parents. And after your parents, I think it's siblings, and I think it might go to aunts or uncles or something like that. But so I hope she likes his parents, because she just became a co-owner with his parents. Did we all just cringe a little bit and think, do I like them enough to be the co-owner with them? You with me? Things to think about when you're considering living and owning something with somebody. It's more than just you. Do I want to be a co-owner with that couple, that group? So in this case, Beth sold out to Carrie and Dante. Ali had no say in the matter. And so now hopefully he likes them. Hopefully they get along at least, because now it's 3 owners as tenants in common. Okay, so the differences. Here's one of those places to make a chart or make a list. Here's how you remember it. With tenants in common, it allows unequal shares of ownership. You can split your ownership up unequally. With joint tenants, it's assumed that it's going to be equal shares. Now, some of these words look kind of like assumed. Why isn't it guaranteed? Well, with joint tenant, with all of these forms of ownership in real life, you can kind of pretty much tailor make them exactly how you want it to be. But for the purposes of taking this this exam, you just need to know, here's basically what tenants in common means, here's what joint tenancy is, and here's what tenants by the entirety is. Just for the purpose of knowing the fundamentals. For the most part, joint tenants is going to be equal shares. Tenants in common, you can buy it at different time periods, different times of acquisition. With joint tenants, you must buy it at the same time in order to be one of the joint tenants. And then with tenants in common, if one of them dies, whoever they choose to leave it to is now the new owner. Their will determines who inherits their share. Right of survivorship is not included. So if you want to be able to leave your portion to your heirs, then you need to own it as a tenant in common. Because with a joint tenancy, if one owner dies and they try to leave it to their heirs, it's not going to work. Even if they wrote it in the will, this goes to my spouse and kids, the attorney handling the probate is going to say, well, it says here on the deed that they were a joint tenant with these co-owners. Therefore, it doesn't matter what it says in their will. Their co-owners that are surviving are the ones who now own it. Sorry, spouse and kids, parents, whoever. The heirs have no bearing. So again, these are just the general differences to help you. And remember, joint tenancy is not something that is favored in North Carolina in real life. We just don't do it that much here. Back to tenants. Tenants by the entirety as a recap. You must be spouse. Let's see. When the title is received, you can be married. Most married people own it this way. I'll get it out eventually. But you don't have to be married. You don't have to choose this if you are married. You could be a joint tenant or a tenant in common. And you both have to sign off. It would require both spouses' signatures to list the property, by the way, or to sell it, sign the contract. You can't force them to sell. It's favored most commonly. It's the most typical kind of ownership for married people. And it's going to be the way it's worded, the way it's done, unless you ask specifically not to. I think I mentioned this already. If a single person buys property by themselves, they are an owner in severalty. Then later they get married. Now they are a concurrent owner? No. They are not automatically tenants by the entirety. Yes, now their new spouse would have to sign off to sell it, but they're not automatically put on the deed unless you want to. If you do put them on the deed and you're not tenants by the entirety, then you would be tenants in common because you bought it at different times. You bought it years ago. You're adding them to the deed later. Therefore, you can't do it as joint tenants because it was two different times of acquisition. Therefore, tenants in common would be how you would do it. So if you're not owning it as tenants by the entirety, you're probably going to be a tenant in common. And then when you're selling property, even if only one of you is on the deed, but you're married, that spouse has to sign the deed also. Can't sell the property without both spouses' signatures on the deed because of marital rights. How do we terminate tenancy by the entirety? Well, you die and it's no longer applicable. It's not necessary anymore because the spouse is dead. Now it's an ownership in severalty situation, single owner. And that's because of right of survivorship. The survivor owns all of it now. But it could also be terminated through legal agreement. You could say together, look, we bought it together as tenants by the entirety. Let's just say let's upgrade. Let's buy a bigger house together. And we'll keep this one as a rental. But also, isn't your friend really good at real estate investing? Let's bring them in as a third partner. Let him buy into it. Give us some money to add him to the deed. And so now it's the two spouses plus a third person, and they all choose to make it a tenants in common situation. Now it's three people. It just so happens that two of them are married, but all three together own it as tenants in common. Well, let's say what they just did was terminated the tenancy by the entirety in favor of a different kind called tenants in common. So they could choose to and have an attorney write it up according to their wishes. And then an actual real divorce, not a separation. That doesn't do it. You're still married, even though you're separated. But the legal official divorce terminates tenancy by the entirety. As per whatever the divorce agreement says. Is one going to buy out the other? Are they they're like, I don't want to live, son, that person you left me for to live in my house. I ran into that before. Had a client actually say that. And I'm in the middle of husband and wife getting a divorce. and he cheated. And she's like, I'm not agreeing to let him buy me out because she's not going to live in my house. And I didn't blame her one bit. And the weird part was, at some point later, he called me and said, hey, she won't let me buy it out. I really want my house because it's my house. I'm going to get my buddy to call you, and he's going to be willing to claim to be the owner, and then later he'll sell it to me. He tried to get me to agree to this. He just threw it on me one random Saturday night on a phone call, and I'm like, no, I owe the same amount of agency and loyalty to both of you, you and the wife. It's not my business that you are not happy with each other, that you are both the owner, you are both my client. So no, I can't go along with your attempted fraud. I won't do that. He did not choose to use me to help him buy his next house. He was mad at me, but she was happy with me. So I helped her buy her next house. And that's how it could go down, right? Legal separation is not good enough. That will not terminate it. Divorce only compared to the two. Got to get to that divorce. So if we have more than one owner, concurrent owners who want to have the fewest limitations on their ownership, which of the three methods gives the fewest limitations? In common, joint, or by the entirety? Which one gives the fewest limitations? Good job. You got this. Tenants in common, by far. Everybody got it. Great job. Okay, now there are some property types we need to talk about. If you live in a house that's detached, like its own separate single house just sitting there, that is called single family, a single family dwelling. I'm in a single family dwelling. But if what you live in is connected to another unit owned by someone else, now we're talking about hybrid ownership. Hybrid forms of ownership. There's 4 basic types when it's connected to another one. Community interest is involved, right? More than one person, like there might be an elevator lobby. There might be a pool, swimming pool, tennis court. There might be hallways and stuff. So those are hybrid forms of ownership. Let's start with the condominium. What you own in a condo is not the dirt, not the ground that the building is on. You don't own the ground. You don't own that part. You own the interior airspace. Painted surface to painted surface. That's what you own in a condominium. And then that common area, which might be the hallway and the elevator lobby and the swimming pool area, that's common area that everybody gets to use. The ownership of that common area is by all the other owners as tenants in common. There's something familiar from 5 minutes ago. You're a tenant in common with all of those other strangers that you live in the same building with, the same condo building. So you own the common area with them as tenants in common. You own your own unit that you live in as some sort of fee simple method. You might hopefully own it as fee simple absolute, but you could own it as fee simple defeasible if you had to keep using it a certain way, blah, blah, blah. But you probably it's going to be fee simple absolute. So there's 2 forms of ownership going on at the same time with a condo. Your ownership of the common area along with everybody else, and your ownership of your individual unit. But what you actually own inside that unit is not the guts of the wall, not the interior of the wall space with the 2x4s and the insulation, just the painted surfaces to each other, the airspace. Those common areas could have a couple of different elements. It could be the swimming pool and tennis court that everybody gets to share. But then if you want to pay extra, you could have maybe gym membership or a boat slip or maybe a garage. Maybe there's not enough garages for everybody, for every unit. They're only for those who want to pay the extra money to have access or have the storage space. So those would be called limited common elements. compared to the common elements that are shared by everybody. The only other thing you need to know about condos falls under this for new construction condos. Watch this one carefully. This is a testable item big time. Under the North Carolina Condo Act of 1986. Doesn't matter that it was written in 1986. That's just when the legislation was created. It applies to brand newly built condos. For new construction condos only, the developer has to record a declaration statement basically saying, here's what this condo is going to include. They also, and by the way, when I say record, what do I mean when I say record? Anybody have a guess real quick? When I say they recorded the deed, or they're recording the plat, or they're recording the declaration, are they hitting the record button on their phone? Are they recording it as they speak it? It's not that kind of recording. To record something, thank you, India, it means basically, documenting it, but what you're officially doing, there we go. You're putting it on the public record. And Libby says at the registrar's office. That is exactly right. The Register of Deeds office is located in probably the town center or the county seat or the main city, like in Cabarrus County. It's Concord, downtown Concord has the government buildings in it, and that's where the Register of Deeds office is located. That's where you go if you want to tell the whole world something. You would record your deed. When you buy the property, the deed gets recorded at the Register of Deeds office. So that's also accessible since it's public record, available to anybody in the whole world. It's available online. Most of these Register of Deeds offices have online access. In other words, you can look up your family or your neighbors or your friends, and you can see their deed. Just go to the county Wake County Register of Deeds, ROD, Wake County or Cabarrus or Mecklenburg or whatever the county is. You'll find the Register of Deeds, and then it'll ask you how you want to search. By their name, by their address, and you'll find the deed. It's on the public record. Well, when you're putting it on the public record, it could be a deed, and in this case, for a condo development, that developer is going to record the declaration, which says this is how we're going to do this condo community. It's also going to be recording the plat map. When you see the word plat, think map. And it looks like a survey. Let me see here real quick. So you can see a plat map in action. There's not much action to it. Can't spell condominium today. There we go. Oh, good. You were watching that. So these are what plat maps might look like. It's obviously a map, an overhead view showing the units. In this case, I think that was just a neighborhood plat map. I'm looking for specifically a condo one. That's more of a site plan, but these are connected units, so you get the idea. So a condo plat map, that might be a little better one. That's for apartments, but it's going to be a similar idea, multiple units in one of the structures. So we've got 3 buildings over here, 3 more right here, 4 down at the bottom. And so it looks a little more like this. Oh, wow. Giving us all kinds of extra stuff. I just want that original thing. How far down do I have to go? No newsletter. Here, I'll do it this way. Boom. Not going to be clear, but it's a literal map, and it's recorded. So you can see where building 1 is going to be in relation to building 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Right? So, according to this legislation, the Condo Act of 1986, developer has to record the plat map and the declaration. They have to create an owners association, a unit owners association, somebody to run it, to send the mean letters when somebody leaves their garbage in the hallway or breaks the rules. And then here's the big one. Here's the one to really remember for sure. All of them, but this is one of the numbers that you need to remember. If you buy new construction condominium, you have 7 days to back out. You get buyer's remorse. You wish you had not done it. You have 7 days to get out of it. There's a 7-day right of rescission for new construction condominium purchases. Write that one down. And this is only for condominiums, not for townhouses. Next one we're going to talk about are the townhouses, but for condos, that's what this is about. Developer records the plat and the declaration, creates an owners association so that the owners that are going to be buying these new units have a say and they kind of run the show. They could choose to hire out the management of the owners association if they wanted to one of those like Hawthorne or the ones I can't think of now, but the developer has to create the original owners association. And then the developer has to give the buyer of new construction condos 7 days to back out of the contract. So that's a condo. That was about airspace. And I see we've got a couple minutes left. So let me hit townhouses real quick. With a townhouse, it's different because it's more like vertical, not horizontal ownership, because you actually own the dirt, the land that it's on. So this unit over here in the corner that I'm trying to show you with my cursor, but you can't see it. That first and second floor is part of the townhouse, right? And the dirt that it's on and the little courtyard in the back, perhaps. It's land included. Townhomes include the land. If you buy a new construction townhome, is that covered under the Condo Act of 1986 allow you to back out within 7 days? No, because it's not a condo. You with me? That's what they'll do to you. Watch that on the test. Now, the other thing that's different is how you own the common area. Because in a townhouse complex, you could also have swimming pool, tennis court, all that good stuff. Well, you don't own that in a townhouse. You don't own it as a tenant in common. The owner of the common elements with a townhouse community is the homeowners association. And then because you're an owner of a unit of a townhouse in the development, you get to use the common elements. But the official owner of them is the HOA. So the difference between condo and townhouse, what do you own? Condo, you own airspace, wall to wall. Townhouse, you own the dirt too. And then the common area owned by HOA in a townhouse, owned by the fellow owners as tenants in common when it's a condo. That's about it for these two. We'll get into the other two next week, and we'll finish out this. Put your name in the chat for me. And what else? I got if you haven't sent them, I think I got most all of your homework assignments. Be sure to send that difference between willful, negligent, omission, and misrepresentation. We will bring those out when we're going to hit on license law and commission rule again, because again, we're going to hit on that way before we reach it in the syllabus. So that will come in handy. I'm going to use it. That was not a waste. The condo rules, somebody said, are these North Carolina rules only? What a condo versus a townhouse is, like airspace versus land, that's a national thing. But the North Carolina Condo Act of 1986 is a North Carolina specific. And therefore that type of thing could be different in other states. I don't have an assignment for you. Just keep on going in order. So this was chapter 2. How far along are we here in this chapter? We got about another 30, 45 on this chapter, I think. No, probably an hour at least, because we got lien stuff, lien related things and easements. Yeah, we got a good hour and a half. We're just going to make our way through in order, guys. Yes, somebody asked, could you purchase the book purchases? Both the digital and the hard copy are available. The links are available in Notion. Looks like, according to some of you that it takes a while to get the hard copy version, but the online version, obviously, you'll get instantly. So sorry you're having to wait. You're welcome. But have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday next week. Take care.